Okay, I'll introduce Sharon Fountain. The first question is like, why Sharon Fountain? Why Sharon Fountain? Why Sharon Fountain now? Mostly it's like you guys who are here in the room, she agreed to participate and help us out with the testing and the experiment of what we're doing. But she's the first person I asked because I think she's infinitely fascinating and we could talk for hours and hours. So I thought, well, that's a good place to start. And so Sharon Fountain is a master trainer. She and my mother used to be partners, and she's been in the business a long time, for 40 years. And you can see how professional I am about all this. She's been in the business a long time because of her love for being in the training service. She says her life purpose is to feel spiritually free to risk, trust, and connect while helping others to do the same. I personally chose her because I'm interested in her depth and breadth of knowledge and her capacity to see the big picture and call bullshit on outdated or harmful structures. And she thinks well on her feet. And so this is a great first guest to have. She's very gracious, and Sharon, I thank you for doing this.
It's a pleasure.
Is there anything you want to add? Anything I left out of importance?
No, that's good. That's good. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. So my first question to you is, what can you give us a difference about what's the difference? Like, what is a master trainer, and how is that different from being a master coach?
Gosh, there are a lot of differences. So there are a number of fields that are closely aligned, but they wear different hats, and different organizations have rules about what's this and what's not this. And many of the skill sets are the same, but they're applied differently. Mm-hmm. So in training, employee training, there is a specific agenda. There's content that we want to get across. We're hoping people will learn it and be able to apply it. And that requires also that you can think on your feet and draw in your audience, but it's largely trainer driven by way of facilitating and encouraging people to jump in and add their own ideas. Mm-hmm. When you look at what's coaching is a different hat. Coaching is centered in curiosity about what's going on with the client, with the basic belief that the client has their own best answers. And so through mm-hmm. deep and skillful questioning, our job as coaches is to help people come up with their own answers. Mm-hmm. You might also add consulting, and in consulting, it's a little bit of both, where there's some expert knowledge that may be shared with a client, but in coaching, that's frowned upon. In coaching, we want really it to be client driven and mm-hmm. to pretty much just be asking the questions.
Okay. What would you say is your favorite part about training and versus your favorite part about coaching?
Okay. What I love about training and coaching is the interaction. Mm-hmm. But in the training, I can be more of a player, because I can play off of people. It's much like our conversations where we laugh and giggle and we go off in other directions, and you give an example and I give an example, and that's great. So there's the flexibility to shift in order to serve what's best for the client in both cases. What I love in both circumstances is when a light bulb goes on for somebody.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
And when something that I said is something that they're ready to hear and it makes sense to them. Mm-hmm. It's just in coaching, I often do one-on-one coaching. Sometimes mm-hmm. I'll do group coaching, but much of my coaching is one-on-one. I had a man who works for a U.S. federal agency in a coaching meeting last year, and he, excuse me, he was telling me that one of his challenges is as a first line supervisor, setting limits and saying no to people, even though he knows the answer is going to be no.
Right, right.
And so he would wait 24 hours. And he said he did this at work and he also did this at home, which for the people on the receiving end is going to be very irritating because they probably already guessed he's going to say no, but he won't just say it up front.
Yeah, so it just breeds more anxiety.
It just breeds more anxiety and potential frustration and things along that line. And through the conversation that we had, I was talking to him about messages that he got growing up. You know, what are the driving messages that told you about what made you a good kid and a bad kid? Mm-hmm. And through that conversation, and we all have those. And some of those follow us into adulthood and get in our way. Mm-hmm. And so through the course of that coaching conversation, he had a light bulb and he says, oh God, my grandmother said to me at least 100 times, no is not in my vocabulary. Yeah. That was an amazing breakthrough for him. He realized he's still being the good boy. He's still pleasing his grandmother. Right. And she may not have said that he shouldn't say no, but when she said that she will not say no because it's not in her vocabulary, he got the implicit message that that's what's the right thing to do and the right way to do it.
Right, because that's how it's hard to say how you encode these things as children.
Yes, yes.
And you can encode the exact words, but the meaning behind them as a kid, how we encode them could be completely opposite than what the person meant the message to be.
Sure, sure. And the way that those messages are typically given is because if we're helping to raise a child, whether it's our child or somebody else's child that we're close to, we give them the rules for living. Mm-hmm. You know, do, don't, shouldn't, etc. Mm-hmm. And because they're young and they don't know how to discriminate, we give them in very narrow messages. Always, never, must, can't, have to.
Yeah.
And because they would go anywhere with anyone and they would put anything in their mouth. And we want to, among the many things that we're trying to help young people do,
stay alive.
Is to stay alive. And then second is be able to navigate a complex culture.
Right.
And it starts with the family culture and goes out from there. And many parents it never occurs to them to modify those messages as the child develops.
Yeah. Right.
For example, one of the messages I got growing up from my mother was a safety message: never speak to strangers ever.
which is a great thing to front load for somebody who's going to be a consultant and a trainer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There was one exception to that. She did give me permission to speak to a policeman.
Oh, yes.
and there were not many police women when I was growing up. So somewhere along the line, I had to examine that message and to give myself permission to decide who's safe and who's dangerous.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But a lot of people don't do that. And if you think about so many of the messages that we get growing up, some of them are so deeply embedded that, barring brain damage, that we can be hijacked by them at a moment's notice. And it can show up working against us in any particular role relationship.
Time. Let me go back. I want to go back to where we're talking about the training. What I've been dying to ask you, and I saved it so we could do it on film, or on live, is I know that you have just done like your first online training because of the pandemic, and that I don't want to say you're technologically challenged, but from what you've told me, you're just like, yeah, I'm not really into that, or it's not, but it's all new for you. And this is fantastic because you're just doing it and you're kicking butt. And I'm so impressed and I'm so proud of you. And it's, so tell me about what is that like after that many years of training. Of course, it's a really long-winded question. After that many years of training and being face-to-face, what is that like for you to now jump off the cliff and do digital training?
Well, let me pray for a minute and tell you, I must confess, During one day at the beginning of the closure and the pandemic, when everybody was being encouraged to stay home, I got notices from 3 different clients asking me to learn and be able to use 3 different platforms. One being Zoom, one being WebEx, and the third one being on demand. And I'm a right brain behavioral scientist. My husband is the left brain rocket scientist. So all this technology stuff is something that I have avoided because I love the connection with the people. And so I thought about retiring.
Oh, seriously? Oh,
I really
wow.
did. I thought maybe this is the time to just hang it up and say, chuck it. You know, just chuck this whole thing. And so I thought of it because I was initially overcome with anxiety.
Okay.
I don't know how to start. But fortunately, there are online trainings you can make. I talked to a number of people, including you, and you gave me some reassurance that this would not kill me. And that I could still connect with some people. And, you know, through it, when I finally decide to do something. So I'm a person who, when people look at me, they see that I carry myself with confidence and personal power. And that's true, except for when it's not.
Yeah. Yes.
And sometimes it's just not there. And the little kid in me was stomping her feet and, you know, shaking her fist and saying, I don't want to, because I had carefully, deliberately avoided this for all these years because I love the human touch and the human connection. So, but when I decide to do something, even if I'm afraid, I don't let the fear stop me.
Yeah.
So I started reaching out. Some people reached out to me and said, we can give you these tutorials and let us practice and learn. And it's working out. I did my first Zoom meeting with a small audience in April. Yesterday was my first WebEx where I could not see them at all.
I don't know. I don't.
That was hard.
Wow.
It was hard for me, but I discovered that instead of using chat so much, because, you know, just the technology, the chat would come up and I'm trying to talk to them and trying to manage the agenda. It would scroll by so fast sometimes that I couldn't keep up with it, even though I had a producer in both of those circumstances.
Right.
And both of them were excellent and very, very helpful. But I thought, okay, on WebEx, what works really well if I ask them a question and I say, raise your hand if, and I can call on you. Okay. So in that case, I was able to at least hear them and they could interact, and then I could have somebody say, you know, do a red check or a green check if you're pro on this, and a red X if you're con on this. So I found a way with some anxiety the whole time. I don't know if I was breathing my normal way during the entire training program, but found a way to make it work. And last night I was doing a happy dance.
Wow.
I was so happy because they liked it.
Yeah. And so they could see you, but you couldn't hear or see them. Is that correct?
They could not see me either.
Right. Oh, wow. God.
So it was pure audio.
So visual. That's
exactly. And most people are visual. I'm highly visual, followed by kinesthetic. So I've got to see it or do it or get my hands on it. And the auditory is not my best channel. No. And so that was a challenge.
You're a better woman than me. I don't know if I could do that. That would, because it just, not that I couldn't do it, but it just wouldn't be fun. And you know, that's what rules me. It's like, that doesn't sound like fun. I don't want to do that. You know, I could do it if I wanted to.
Exactly. Well, that's where the little kid in me. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Because my little kid was stomping her feet and saying, I don't want to, and you can't make me. That was several weeks ago, but that was during the first weeks of the pandemic when, due to the shock of it, I think I spent the first 2 weeks watching Turner classic movies and eating comfort food.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do admit if somebody called me and said, okay, we're going to give you a ton of money and, you know, to do the WebEx thing, and you can't, I would be like, all right, I'm going to make this work. You know, so it's certain motivations. But if I was making good money and somebody offered me that, I'd be like, meh, that's not so much fun.
Here's the thing though. Okay, so you and I are similar temperament in terms of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And for me, one of the things that brought me back to saying, okay, let me learn to do this was the challenge.
True. I do like an impossible challenge.
Yes, it was like, let's just see if I could do this too. It's like,
no. What motivates me is when they say, that's not possible. Or, yeah, want to watch? Want to bet? Yeah, that'll, that has motivated me in many impossible, strange situations. Let me ask you another question. What do you find most frustrating about, I mean, I know you haven't had, you're a newbie in the doing training with the digital, but what frustrates you at this point? What do you find frustrating?
In regard to digital connection?
Yeah.
It's the overwhelming task of converting classroom training material to the digital format and working out the timing. I was off in my timing yesterday. I gave myself permission to be that because it's my first time doing it. So we ran a little bit late, but I'm flexible, and because I've been training for 40 years, I know how to speed it up and slow it down, and maybe I can skip this or do it differently or debrief it in a different fashion. But it takes time to do things like put people in breakout rooms, and then there's a lag time between the time that the breakout room closes and they come back. And sometimes people get bumped off, and so they never have the conversation. And thank God in both of these circumstances, I had a producer. In the Zoom training, I could see them, and I also could visit the breakout rooms. In the WebEx that I did yesterday, none of us could see anyone, and I could not visit the breakout rooms, so I didn't know where they were.
Okay.
Only the producer could visit. And in one case, we had them working in pairs. She never got to all of them before we called it to an end, because I decided we were too late on time. We needed to shift it. So part of it is just learning that, and it's an art form that I have not yet developed nor refined.
But that's like stumbling around in the dark.
Yes.
And trying to. It's like I like that the description of what the difference between complicated and complex. And complicated is when you get a motorbike in a box from IKEA and have to put it together. Complex is when you get the same motorbike in the box from IKEA, but you have to put it together in the dark with 3 other people that don't speak the same language.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, that's what. But it's the level of complexity to doing something like that. And it seems to me that you really, really have to trust your team.
Very much so. And I'm so grateful for both of the people who served as producers. And for the WebEx that was yesterday, the previous day, I had a rehearsal with a few people who had volunteered, just like we have many, many people out there today who are joining us who know each other. And that gave me some good feedback from them about pay attention to this and pay attention to that, and this is the piece that worked and what have you. So that was very, very helpful. And it's like anything else, you just start it and you do it one step at a time. You trust your team. And in my case, I was very fortunate because they really had my back.
And how long had you known them?
Oh gosh, well the producer for the first one I met on the telephone because he was going to be my producer.
So basically like right then.
Well, it was a few days before when it was. And he doesn't normally serve the producer's role. He was snatched from an international training role to be a producer by this prime contractor. But he knew a lot more than I did, and he was most generous with his time, very, very helpful. And in the case of the woman who was the producer yesterday, I met her last year, and I've worked with her a number of times, both in person and online and on the telephone, and she's spectacular.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. It's like somebody, when you're confident in the people behind, it's like with Saskia, it's like, I don't have to worry about any of this because
yes.
Saskia is doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But it gives a level of calmness to it because I'm just not worried, you know. I don't know if that makes Saskia worry more, but
No, I'm kind of used to being that person, so no, I'm not freaked out. But if I might just interrupt there, because we have a question leading up to that. You just said like having a producer takes like a hell lot of load off your shoulders. What else are your learnings in that process, and what would you say influenced the whole process in a positive way, or what made it different in a positive way?
Let me answer the last part first. I think I was afraid that maybe I couldn't step up to the challenge.
mm-hmm.
It was in part because I didn't want to step up to the challenge. So motivation was a piece of it, and learning that I could do this, and I'm building it's a fragile new foundation, but it's a foundation nevertheless. And I can build on that just like I've built on every other complex task or skill set that I've developed my entire life. This is just a different aspect of it.
Right.
And I learned so much about how to communicate with people differently when I can't have my preferred methods for connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was going to be my next question is how can you tell that you're holding their attention? How did I mean, you in particular, because I've read a lot about this and it's like, okay, but I'm asking, I want to know can you feel it? And how did you know?
So with the first one, when it was on the Zoom platform, I could see their faces.
Okay, right.
And it was a very small group. There were only 6 in the class besides the producer and besides me. So I could see their faces and see what was going on with them. And I could visit the breakout rooms, and that was useful. I could eavesdrop on their conversations to see where they were. So that gave me the confidence about their connection. i.e., when they were in the breakout rooms, they were actually doing what we had asked them to do, you know? Right. Instead of saying this sucks or something like that. Yesterday, it was different because I couldn't do that. And I had more anxiety about it because I'm not accustomed to it. And that's why I started raise your hand if and use a green check or a red X if, and then I could call on them. Plus there was the participants, and there were 28 of them.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
Many of them were making comments in the chat box when they chose not to raise their hand or participate, but in essence they were saying me too, or good point. One of the things that I asked yesterday's class was a time management and managing multiple priorities class, and there was quite a bit of wit that showed up in the chat box. One of the things that I asked them to do was to tap into their natural wisdom about some of the things that steal our time. We call them time thieves. And one of those topics was bosses or powerful others. And someone in the chat box wrote, bosses are powerful others. Isn't that what we call children these days? You know, that just cracked me up.
Right.
When I was talking about checking things off of to-do lists and all of that left brain stuff, I did mention that when you do that and you celebrate that, I use the word happy dance. And a couple of people used the word happy dance later on in chat. So that told me that there was a connection.
That they were connected. Okay.
And I silently wiping my brow and thank you. Thank you.
But it's interesting to hear you talk about the, I want to say the onboarding of this kind of a thing, because it's all new and noticing those particular things. Because it's interesting for me watching you learn this stuff. It's pretty cool. And you're obviously, the way you're speaking or whatever, you like learning. And that's obvious, like, oh God, and then we had to do this. There's none of that with your talking, which is what makes it such fun to interact with you and when we have our calls.
Well, that's where I was initially.
Yeah.
Because initially it was, I don't want to.
Well, yeah.
But if I'm going to do it, I've got to find some way to connect. Now the woman who did the largest amount of converting my time management design to the WebEx did an experimental tape so that I could see how she did it. And she's done exclusively web stuff for decades. I don't know, a long time.
Right.
And the way that she delivers was very slow. It was very deliberate. It was not monotone, but it was very measured. And so in my rehearsal, I tried to do that, and that felt like a straitjacket.
Right.
Because
I was just imagining myself. I was like, yeah, I'd never be able to do that. And I'd be
it just wasn't working. And finally, during the rehearsal, again, knowing that I had a safe and loving audience that was there to help support me, finally I moved into my groove and realized, okay, I can be myself and be my own style, my own way of connecting. I've just got to figure out a different way to do it because we can't see each other.
Right.
It's up to me to lead that.
But it's sort of like being a writer, and it takes a while. It's like, what is my voice?
Yes.
And so on video, and it's completely different. It's different if you're doing a vlog, a video blog, where you're just doing taping. But the interaction thing is a completely different animal. So it's not, I guess it begs the question, it's like, do you end up start to feel schizophrenic? You have different types of yourself in different settings.
Well, that makes sense to me, though. You're speaking to the choir here, because every now and again when I'm in a class, I will tell them that I may sound like I'm schizophrenic because I actually talk to different parts of myself.
Right.
Yeah. I reassure the little kid who doesn't want to do it or who's scared that it'll be okay, and I nurture that, and then I move into the rational problem solving me and cycle through. But quite frankly, all of us do that all the time anyway. It's just we don't know how to label it or don't know how to know what part of it is. But I teach that stuff, so
exactly.
So I tell the scared part of me to go someplace safe, out of the nurturing part of me, and then the rational adult part of me handles it. Now that sounds a bit cuckoo.
If somebody's not used to talking about it, but that's again what's so great about our conversations is because I can skip over all of that stuff and jump in and out, or we mention it, and you can put this in a box and you put that in a box, and so there's the common knowledge makes it for great conversation.
Yes.
And there's another Karen who's in on this call, and she knows a lot of the dynamics. I don't know how to describe it. Karen is like, oh God, that's so wrong. But she knows, about the coaching and a lot of the same terms. And so when we have conversations, it's very similar, because you don't have to, describe what you're talking about, because the backgrounds are fairly similar. Yeah.
It is so comforting to have someone who speaks your language and gets who you are. We all need that. We all need that.
Yeah. Which brings me to what is is it the same when you're teaching in front of somebody else, when you're teaching in front of a live group, face-to-face and digitally? What is similar and what is different about how you can connect with people? How do you feel about that? And to let people feel seen, is that possible? Or, and I know this is all new for you, but what are your first impressions about that? Or do you feel optimistic about that going into it?
I'm much more optimistic today than I might have been a couple of weeks ago, because I didn't know how it was going to play out. And
Mm-hmm.
because, again, going back to my life purpose is to feel spiritually free.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and spirit for me is it's a big topic, to risk, trust, and connect,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm all about connection and to
Mm-hmm.
help other people do the same. So I had some concerns about that. And that's why I'm
Right.
glad that I shifted from write in chat, where it's scrolling real fast, to raise your hand if you'd like to weigh in on this, and to doing the checks and the X's. And that gave them an opportunity to talk about the upside or the downside of something, or what they liked or didn't like about something. And then we could also hear each other's voices. When I could hear their voices, that, and this again is on the WebEx yesterday, that helped my heart feel happier, because it was the human piece, not just the digital written word on the check.
Right. God, that's really valuable. That's really valuable. And then, okay, here's another one. You're giving great feedback on these questions, by the way. And so I always like the fact of asking people who are sort of on the outside of a particular I don't know, phase of something, but they're not in the norm, somebody who's an outlier. And so being somebody new coming into the digital world, and the digital training, in your perspective, kind of like what's missing, and what would you say, they need to do this needs to be do you have any idea with that? And I like that, because some people might say, yeah, but I'm just a beginner, I wouldn't know. And it's like, oh, no, those are the people who have the ideas, because aren't already biased about how things are or how things should be. It's it's sort of like it formed in the thing of like, oh, it would be great, or it would make this better.
Yes. And I'm not sure I'm there yet, but one of the things that I learned in training and consulting, and this was in the master's degree where I met your mom, is you deal with your client where your client is, not where you want them to be or think they should be by now. And so what has been a problem for me in the past, when I was speaking to someone who was much more accomplished and experienced in the digital world, is their assumptions about what the baseline is.
Right.
And it goes back to when I went back to college as a grown-up, a married woman, shifted my major and started studying business administration, which meant going into a different kind of mathematics than I'd had in my previous college education. And that meant going back to algebra that I hadn't done since high school, and it wasn't my bliss. So my husband is a rocket scientist, as you know. He's actually an electrical engineer, but he works in the space field. And so I was taking a class that they called Math 10, and it's the Dick and Jane primer of algebra. To get the basic language down, it is like, look, X, see Y, run. So run, Y, run. And so what I asked him to do, and I knew that this was risky for him, I said, please, will you be my tutor? But I wanted to make it safe, because I know that a lot of husbands
that could be grounds for divorce in some couples.
I knew that had a lot of risk for him, potential risk for him. So I wanted to make it safer, and I said, look, it's safe to assume that I know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and manipulate fractions. Beyond that, assume nothing. You cannot talk down to me. Talk in the tiniest little baby steps you possibly can. And he set out to do that. And it was still way above my head, because he's forgotten more about the topic than I will ever know. What finally worked for us was when we would go through my book together. That helped him understand the language. So taking that to this digital world, even though that's a long example, a lot of times when I speak to someone, it might even be when I'm talking to the people who host my website or things along this line in the tech department, they know so much more than I do. And so even when they explain something in very simple terms from their perspective, it may still be above my head. So I'm always grateful to the folks when I tell them that I understood the words that you use, but I'm still not getting the meaning. Can you back it down and damp it down a little bit? Because I need a grounding and a starting point before I can understand what you're trying to help me do.
Right. Because just the concept on certain things, the learning curve.
The learning curve. And people are drastically different, you know. And in the case of my husband helping me with algebra, what he thought was the baby steps was still far advanced for me.
Right.
And he really tried, and it worked out. It worked out. But we had
you guys are still married.
Yes, we're still married, and this is many years later. So we just had to find an appropriate starting point.
Yeah. Cool. Let me ask you another question. What provokes your curiosity and energizes you when you think about the future and the digitization, using, well, technology and digitization, just ask Saskia, those are very different things. And, but, you know, using technology, is there anything that you are energized and optimistic about the future?
Well, I'm so grateful that we have the technology that we do, even if I don't understand a lot of it, and I'm certainly not accomplished with it. But if we didn't have the technology during this particular point in time, I think about how isolated we would all be. Starting with mass media, radio, television, things along that line. But because we have the internet, because there's so many people who have figured out how to do so many things virtually, we can still carry on in ways that we couldn't otherwise.
Right.
We can stay connected with family and friends. We're doing Zoom calls every week with friends, and on holidays with some family members where we can't hug them, but we can see them. Very grateful to the people who do that. Plus, with my husband's being in the space business, I can see what technology can do. For those of you who don't know Glenn managed the New Horizons spacecraft to Pluto. And it's the fastest spacecraft that's ever been launched. And when he told me that they were running that spacecraft on 200 watts of power, which you have light bulbs that are running on more power than that. And it took 9.5 years to get to Pluto.
Yeah.
You know, so when you think about your math education, your STEM, you know, science, technology, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, when you think about the STEM education at work, I'm so impressed by the things that those folks can take that algebra that I learned and do this with it. Now I can do magic with the people. Glenn and I tease each other that when we go to a party and we talk about it afterwards, you'd never know we were at the same place. Right. What he sees,
but it's all, for me, it's all an art. It's an art, whether you know, it's creative, whether it's, you know, with people or something or mathematics or engineering. It's creative. That's
yes. And when you think about what's being done in robotics, especially in the biomedical field, I mean, in the medical field, it's so impressive. And I think about how that adds to so many people's lives. They can now do things they couldn't otherwise do. So while technology is not my bliss, I'm very grateful to have those people in the world.
Definitely.
Who figure these things out and put them into practical application.
On a scale of, say, 1 to 10, 1 being, or 1 or 0 being completely analog, and 10 being very digital, where would you see yourself on that scale?
Probably closer to 10 now than I was a couple of months ago. I'm not certain where I would have been. Maybe I would have been a 4, because I know how to use some of the functions of my computer, although I've had a computer for decades. I grew up in the secretarial world originally. I used it more as a typewriter and to do documents and training manuals and things along that line. I had to be dragged into learning how to do Express or spreadsheets and things along that line, and to do the calculations online or digitally. So it has moved toward 10. I would say maybe it's a 5 or a 6 now. And I may be overstating that, because I know that even with the first computer I had, I didn't even begin to tap its potential.
Right. Well, I can't. Yeah. I know there's like no way I'm even close to tapping the potential of my devices. That I don't think that'll ever happen.
Yes, but the comfort level, and maybe at this point where I'm talking more, giving myself a number on comfort level than skill.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. And but that wasn't one of the questions that I came up with, and I was like, so I was really proud of myself for coming up with this. Oh, I'm gonna ask everybody. and then you added to it, because like, okay, now like, yeah, I want to say technically, where are you on the scale, but then comfort level, because that's such a huge part of it, and totally separate. So thank you for that. Yeah, because I'm of course making this up as I go along.
Well, for me, if I couldn't get the comfort level, I wouldn't make the strides in being even willing to try out the technology.
Now, what could you say to somebody who is resistant to even try? Is there something that is
I'm thinking. Well, off the top of my head, I'd say it's not as scary as you make it. And there are probably much bigger challenges they've had to deal with in their life, other than zeros and ones. So part of it is somebody knows how to do this. And I know people like me would rather eat spiders than read the manual that comes with things. But there are things in manuals. There are people who can speak your language and to help shepherd you through this. And that looks back to the producers and the people who supported me in learning how to conduct the online training, to which I'm most grateful. I'm thinking about making cupcakes and sending them to them, or sending flowers or something. At the very least, they will be getting thank you notes from me.
Cool. Well, we are like 8 minutes until the hour. And so that went by fast. Good. And so I was wondering if anybody had any questions, or if Sharon, if you had something that has popped into your head that you want to share or ask.
Well, let's check and see if anybody has any questions, because you and I could go on for another 2 hours.
True. So the one question I had already posted, there have not occurred any questions in the chat, although I would encourage anyone to post them if you still have them. But right now there aren't. But I have a question actually that kind of came up. And I want to go back a bit to your teaching experience you just had. Because what I experienced and what I got back from clients I work with is the communication changed in regards to who says what on a call. If you take the meetings they had in their boardrooms until now, and now they have online, they have to manage more who speaks when, how long do people speak, and they experience that they hear from people that would be quite quiet in a boardroom because they're just overshouted by everyone else in the room, right? How do you see that? Have you experienced the same, that you felt like a positive change in how people speak with each other online?
Okay, so it may be different in a meeting, or again, we meet on Saturday nights on Zoom with some of our good friends, and so everybody can talk over everybody because we know each other well. But what I discovered on the WebEx platform yesterday was that, and I suspect this to be the case, but I don't yet know for sure, there was a lot of things that were written in the chat box just as people reacting or responding to things, even if they weren't raising their hand or volunteering to speak on audio. And that may be the opportunity for introverts to get into the conversation, especially if they're outnumbered by the extroverts. And so while I didn't love the chat box, because it was hard for me to monitor it because there were so many little things coming on, I would ask, people, how many things might there be on your to-do list? And with 28 or 29 people posting that, I'm going like this, looking at that piece of it. And so I realized I may need to ask that question differently so I'm not having to scroll it, but it gives people an opportunity to stay connected. And that's really what we're wanting to do, is to give people an opportunity in a way that works for them. An old example of this is I was working with another consultant many years ago. We had a group of 4 people in a productivity enhancement group, and it was a collateral duty for them. This was a consulting contract that I worked on for years. And my colleague was running the meeting, and I was doing what we in my field call process observation. So I was looking at how they were interacting to look at how do we make them productive to accomplish their objective. Sitting next to a man whose name is Larry. And Larry is a very, very, very strong introvert. We were 1 hour and 45 minutes into our 2-hour meeting, and Larry had not said one word. But I knew he was engaged because he was sitting next to me and I could feel it. So I did what we call opening the gate. I said, Larry, I've got the impression you've got some thoughts about what we've talked about today. Will you please share them with us? And he looked at me and with neutral face said, no. And so I'm panicking and thinking, okay, I know Larry's connected. How do we get his contribution? So again, Sharon, thinking on my feet, I said, well, do you suppose you could write it? Because I'm thinking we've got to get Larry's contribution. And this is early on. We've got to get a good group dynamic so they can accomplish what they're set to do. He said that I can do. So everybody took out paper and pencil. Nobody had computers at their desks in those days, and wrote down. And if you've ever watched a dot matrix printer work, where you hear the data dump, zip, 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 and then, or you hear the data dump, it buzzes, and then zip, 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 zip. Larry was like that. He must have written 11 or 12 pages. So what I'd asked him to do was to contribute on his least preferred channel. When I asked him to write it down, we got a book. It was fabulous. And so we built that into the process. Whenever we met, we would spend the last 15 to 20 minutes. Everybody would write it down. I would take it, compile it, feed it back to them. And because this was a collateral duty, they didn't have any homework. We did all of the work for that group in the meeting. And Larry made great, great contributions to the group. We had just had to find the best way for him to make that with his greatest comfort. Now, if I could build on that, having said that, later, Larry became a first-line supervisor. So we really had to work with him on speeding up his willingness and ability to respond on the verbal channel, because now he's managing people and projects and things along that line. So part of it is working with people in their style, where they are. That's one of the challenges.
I was going to say where they are.
Where they are. Exactly. Well, what I learned in graduate school, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is you must deal with your client where your client is. Not what you think they should be or what you want them to be. And I also learned you must give your client what they want as well as what they need. But if they don't see you giving them what they want, they're not open to what they need. And so again, it's how do I connect with the person in a way that frees them up to tell me their truth, their wants, needs, what we're trying to accomplish here, and then put together something that helps them move toward that. Right. That's what really still excites me.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is, I mean, I'm assuming that you're excited about going back and being in front of people,
Yes.
doing the trainings live. But it also must feel pretty good knowing that you can play in all fields now.
Well, yes, that I'm a baby stepper in the other field, but it opened up possibility thinking. Again, you and I are possibility thinkers. So one of the things that I did to help the little kid in me who was scared and mad to get on board with it is that, if I got to the point where I couldn't stand up or I couldn't get to clients, I could still do what I do.
Exactly.
If I would learn how to navigate this world better. And so that's a huge potential benefit to me and other people. And it helps me understand the people who rely on that technology in order to make their best contribution because they've got some limiting factor.
Exactly. That's what excites me about technology in the digital era, is that it's better and better and better. All the tools are better, and the playing field is more and more level, and it allows, more inclusion, more diversity. I find that very exciting. And
yes.
Yeah. But then it also, on the other hand, it's like everything's possible, therefore you have no excuse. And I know that scares a lot of people, though, also, because before they could hide behind the fact that now everything is, the click and point, the point and click, and early in the technology, it was difficult to use, but now it's just so easy. And, it's astounding how many people are using Zoom. It's just absolutely exploded because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and many people who didn't think they could.
Yeah. And so it's going to provoke all these people doing so many things and having ideas and using it in ways that they just never imagined. And that's pretty exciting. Yeah.
It's also exciting when you get to see your grandnephew, who is 10, on a Zoom call, because he wants to share with you that one of his assignments was to read the book Matilda. I don't know if you know the book or the movie.
Yeah.
And Liam is his name. And he asked me, he said, I've got something to tell you. I said, what is it? So he asked if I'd read the book. I said, no, but I've seen the movie numerous times, so I know the story. He says, do you remember the scene where the little boy sneaks the piece of chocolate cake? So his teacher gave them all an assignment to make a chocolate cake.
The teacher just wants chocolate cake.
Well,
she's not fooling me. She's not.
Anyway, so he made this cake on his own using the recipe that I had passed on from my mother-in-law, and it's a beloved recipe. And he talked about how it worked for him and what the challenges were, and his dad was holding up the cake so that I could see it on. So to be able to be included in that,
right.
That's a gift.
Yeah,
it's a very great gift.
Right.
Because I can't get my hands on him at the moment. That we're tactile people. We hug.
Yeah. Cool.
And this too will pass.
Yeah.
It is. I think that's a good last word, especially because I also got the feedback, which I want to also share with you, that it's really amazing to see your learning curve in this field, and of you sharing this learning curve. I think we also learned a lot today about how to go through that. And I love that, because actually that's what I'm earning my money with. And seeing that also from the other side, and having that deep insight, because as you just said, with the level you're starting with, it's different for each and every one of us. And so, yeah, I'm starting on a high level, and I always try to lower on and to find the level the other person is starting on. But for me, especially, it kind of gave me another view on how to find that level and how to get there, because you need to get the clients where they are, right? You need to meet them there. And,
right.
It doesn't help anybody to progress if you just say like, okay, can we lift the level without helping them getting there? So, yeah.
If they don't know where to put their feet, they're not taking a step.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, good. I wanted to we're definitely at the hour, and if anybody's stepping out of the room, I want to say thank you so much for coming and participating in our first experiment and getting this off the ground. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And I'll be talking to all you guys later and asking your opinions, and your feedback would be really appreciated. So thanks a lot.
May I thank you for honoring me in being the first, and also Saskia for shepherding this. It's a pleasure to be working with y'all.
Thank you.
And I can add in the end, Sharon Fountain has agreed to be a guinea pig, and Saskia and I are going to do a makeover. And if it works out, and if it's fun and people like it, we're going to do more of them. We're going to do a makeover on her website. And for somebody, so she's agreed to let us do the before and after, because and that takes courage, because some people would feel a lot of feelings and they're like, no, don't show it. And so Sharon's just like totally cool and courageous and brave about that. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I know it's going to be fun for Saskia and I don't know if anybody else is interested in that, but we're going to have fun. And so yeah, we'll see.
It needs
hopefully we'll do a few of these, and we'll see if it's of interest.
Well, by the way, I'm anticipating and excited about learning a lot about web design from y'all through this process, because that's another area I have totally put aside and left to other people. Mm-hmm. So for me to learn this is exciting.
Cool. Well,
I personally find it a perfect example for what we're doing here, because most people think it's a web page and it's in the digital sphere and you need to know about digital stuff there, right? And of course you do. You need to have some kind of technical background to set it up. But what the web page is more or less a billboard kind of thing, an advertisement place for you, or however you design it, a blog, a way to express yourself, or how you design it. And so it's about the people, and how do I get to people again? And so the technical aspect isn't really what it's about, right? And so combining these things together, I love that as a first project, actually. Yeah.
Me too. I'm excited. I'm doing this, waiting to get started.
But also, Saskia, your talents, it's almost like being a magician, and all the hard work and the nuts and bolts of it, when it's really good, nobody notices it, which is a shame. But it's the beauty and the curse of what you do, because when it's done well, you don't notice anything and it's seamless.
Yeah.
And so what do people acknowledge? What do people say? Wow, that's amazing, because it doesn't, it's a good job. And if people don't, and most people, especially if they're not, digital or technical, they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know the quality of what you're doing. Myself included, there's certain things, yes, I notice very much so, but then other things what you're doing is like, oh, that went really well. That was seamless. That was really nice. But it's like, what went on? But that's what I like about,
I try to keep it on a low level. It's like people know when it's made bad. They realize that no matter their technical level, right? And so preventing the bad is also fine for me, but as they also say, there's no glory in prevention, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited and very grateful to both of you for being willing to take that on.
Cool. Yay.
All right.
I think we can end.
We're gonna end too.
We don't know when we're going to have another one of these. I have to find another victim, guinea pig.
You all better leave now.
Yeah, everybody's like running from the room.
Well, would you want to have Glenn on?
Oh, are you kidding?
I might talk him into it if you wanted to have Glenn on.
I'm just like, oh my God. I know Saskia's like, Saskia's going to be hyperventilating. Mr. Spaceman?
Could be.
Oh, I need to get Saskia. I'm sure Sharon has your address. I would like to have Saskia's address. I'll mail you some New Horizons artifact stuff.
Stop, Sharon. You're going to make me cry.
I'll find some good stuff for you.
Yeah, I'd be honored to have them. So, yeah.
Well, we'd be tickled to death to share it with you.
Okay.
I'll see if I can get you some Ultima Thule stuff as well. I have more of the New Horizons stuff, but I know there's Ultima Thule stuff out there, and I'll ask Glenn to get some.
We need to finish now because I have to breathe.
She's like,
yeah.
All right then.
All right. So thank you all for being part of the first thing, and
right.
We'll inform you in the group as soon as we have we have another interview partner. Sharon has another victim, depending on the view. Yeah. And
both of us should be writing more articles on the LinkedIn page, on the Hybrid Humans page, so you can check in there every once in a while
and interact with us. Tell us what you think of the whole thing. If you want something to be discussed, just tell us and we'll pick that up.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so
then
let's wrap it up. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.